What's up, YouTube, and anyone who's watching? My name is Andrew Ricketts, aka Drew Breeze, and this is the Honest Man's Guide. It's a live webcast. I'm actually about to have a guest, my first guest. So hold up for 1 minute. He's about to come through. Hopefully, we'll get a great discussion going. So I'm gonna holler at you in a second. This is the question we're asking is Jay-Z a billionaire revolutionary? And here's my first guest. Just stay tuned. I know if you hear it, we on the stream. What up, my boy? What up, my boy? I'm literally live streaming right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, bro.
No, you're good. That's perfect. That's what you should be doing. Come over here. Have a seat over here. Have a seat over here.
I brought some equipment.
So I am here with my main man with a planned Cavalier. I'm gonna put him on the screen in a second.
Popped up like Lawrence Fishburne and Pee Wee Herman. Mailman in this motherfucker.
I got cameras, lights.
Like
cameras, lights.
Weed is legal in New York, so it's all good.
I got my main man Cavalier on the set. Here go Cav.
What up? What up?
So we talking about in this live stream, we talking about, is Jay-Z a revolutionary billionaire?
Oh shit.
Is Jay-Z a revolutionary billionaire? I've been
That's an oxymoron.
I mean, look, I've been really parsing this question, right? Because on the one hand, he dropped a crazy verse. Like that was a crazy, layered, meaningful, I would say, accurate to his life story and narrative type of verse. I think he is delivering as accurate a verse as he can about what gave him the courage, the tenacity to come up the way he did, right? And I think that's what makes the verse ill. Is like Jay-Z's always been like Mr. All Facts. You know what I mean? Like I feel like he's
depending on who you ask.
Depending on who you ask, but I feel like Jay-Z's largely been Mr. All Facts. And one thing I enjoy about the story that he's put forth is that he's like, yo, anything's possible. I think that's the main thing. He's saying anything's possible. We can come up in the hood. We can become like whatever we are, moguls, right? But I actually was talking about this yesterday. I was talking about this I was like, yo, Jay-Z telling the truth. Like, is he just like a mouthpiece for like other billionaires? Has he never been a billionaire? Or does Jay-Z actually have all these holdings that he's talking about? And
he would have been doxxed if he did.
I mean, I don't know though. You know what I mean? Like, I think how much of financial holdings are public record? You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I wonder about.
I mean, you could go, I don't know how accurate it is, but you could go on Google and be like, what's Drew's net worth? And like,
it's like $7 in a blind.
Yeah, but shit'll come up. But a lot of shit isn't public record because you have to file taxes. You know what I mean? And
right.
I mean, not that that's public record, but there's record, right? So if he was, case in point, we've questioned Donald Trump's actual wealth or his debts because they were speculative, like the credibility of those things. And this is former president of the United States. So when there was discrepancy, it was enough to fact check if he was sus. And it was like, he's kind of sus, right? Whereas with Jay-Z, someone made a point one time about Jay-Z doing bad business deals, right?
Okay.
That he was a bad businessman.
Oh, wow.
And they made a sound argument, I guess, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then recently I was thinking about that and I was like, is he a bad business? I was like, he's clearly mad successful.
Right.
He was critiqued a lot of times, and we talked about this yesterday about being the first. When you pioneer a move, a lot of times you may get the credit, but you don't get the spoils.
Yeah,
and he did a lot of shit like that.
He's salty about that too. Like he'll let you know. He'll let you know.
When you do that and you get all the critique,
right,
there's not that same energy for the celebration when after the fact it made sense in the long run.
Right.
So if you do something, let's say like do a corporate deal with Samsung and it enables your project to be platinum selling because of that strategy, you get critiqued for doing a cheap move, but then there's now the trend.
Right.
Partnerships
because
to
Travis Scott has done that, Nicki Minaj
and
has
that's
done a
happened
similar
so
thing.
many times with Jay and Nas.
And non-black artists too, right? With white artists, they've done similar things. I feel like either I think it was Bono did a similar kind of like I'm packaging, or no, I think it was U2. It was like
U2, and it was with the iPhone, maybe.
Yeah. And it was like,
yo, it's coming. It's coming. Critique.
I don't think they did.
People were a little annoyed, maybe, but not.
Right.
It's they could do no wrong, right? Bono.
So I think what it starts to bring up for me is like, is capitalism anti-black, right? Like, because if you are a black person who's a master capitalist like Jay-Z, but capitalism inherently is anti-black. That means that one, you're going to catch a lot of flack for like basically mastering a game that wasn't meant for you to win.
Like,
and he's
like Madam C.J. Walker selling hot combs.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. So it's like her anti-blackness is in the fact that like, hey, look, I understand that the messages that we get from external sources are that your hair's not good the way it is. It should be straightened, right? And therefore, black women at the time, it was like a tool.
But that's the thing. The perspective gives all this context, right? Is it anti-black that she enabled black women to have more functionality in the world not built for them?
Right.
So how can we? These systems, we talk about how they're not designed for us, but then the moment you've created the Neo moment, right, to somehow succeed despite those odds, you're now held to the same critique as if you designed the system. And in reality, you weren't supposed to succeed in any way. So there's marvel to the fact that like you even pulled through. Right. The system is inherently not about fairness.
No, it's not meant to be fair. It's not meant to be fair.
And Jay-Z, I think, more points out leveling that than destroying it, and that's why it's not revolutionary.
Okay.
So if you're a billionaire, you're a product of this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The system worked for you in some way or another. So you either have to be down with giving 90% of your wealth to the people. Then that would be revolutionary, right?
Well, yeah,
but no one's going to do that. That's like white people giving up all their privilege to somehow fight racism. They're not going to see a direct relationship between them doing that and things getting better.
But here's the other thing, though. It's like no one's going to do that, but are they going to also invoke the names of revolutionaries who are specifically against capitalism? Like, because I do feel like in Jay-Z, like, because you talk about Samsung as the brand deal, and I like that was a smart move. That was like, yo, I'm going to make sure that via this great digital, and one thing that Jay-Z does that's really smart is he always chooses like second in line like alternative companies like Reebok, Samsung. He's like, yo, I can actually make you competitive within your space against your main competition. Strategy. It's a very good and intentional strategy. That's why he's not a good businessman. I feel like that doesn't even hold any water. That doesn't hold any water. But I think when he uses the Che Guevara, when he uses the Fred Hampton references,
with bling on.
Yeah, and when he uses even the Malcolm X, like I get my by any means on, like Kanye, I think was a little bit more explicit in the sense of saying by any means necessary. He was like, yo, that is a flip on I'm not that, right? Like he's kind of saying like I will do it with the system given. I'm not like that's my means, right? Like I think Jay-Z is really, I was talking about this last night. I feel like he's Machiavellian in the sense that the ends justify the means for him, right? And that's what makes him who he is. That's what makes him a winner, basically. The ends justify the means. But the problem sometimes comes when you start to and we're very close to this song, that Murder for Excellence song about Fred Hampton. Like at least peripherally we're close to it. First Degree Network. And when you use those people who had a really specific critique of capitalism, that's when it becomes dangerous, right?
It is, yeah.
Like, so I think that's the thing that people start to wonder, like, well, if you're going to use those people's names, why? You know, like why
the Che Guevara one made sense to me afterwards. Let me tell you why.
Yeah, tell me.
The timing. When Jay-Z said that,
okay,
you couldn't walk around
seeing the
in Manhattan
without seeing
right. a scruffy white guy with a Che Guevara silhouette on his t-shirt.
Right.
So much so that is actually the inspiration to my own logo.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The Chief logo. Yeah.
But it was the same commentary. You didn't have to know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't about it being me. It was like, because a lot of the people wearing Che didn't know really what they didn't know his message.
They didn't know Che's message.
And in fact, there's some people that argue about really what Che Guevara's actual message was, and that's a whole other conversation.
Okay.
But in that moment in time, Che Guevara's image was selling T-shirts. It wasn't selling revolution.
Right. It wasn't.
So it kind of made sense. Che Guevara with bling on because the ubiquity of that you become a symbol more than the message.
And
now, that's all the time.
Does that
Like we use Black Death to sell news.
Oh, absolutely. What I would say is like, does Jay-Z like employing that method? Does him deploying Che Guevara and saying like, yo, I know this is a ubiquitous symbol, and therefore I'm going to take just the ubiquity and not the meaning and put myself on it so you can see, hey, like, I'm whatever you think this is with bling on. You know what I mean?
It's more that Jay-Z is a poster child for any nigga who read 48 Laws of Power. I'm dead ass.
Yo.
And that
how many
that
books do you think
Jay-Z
has read? Especially ones about like
I think
Fred
he's
Hampton.
I feel like he's read more books in the last 5 years than he did
before.
If I were to guess. But I also don't underestimate. I don't want to underestimate anyone I don't know and the assumptions on what they do to get that information.
Right.
You know, at the same time, Jay's artistic style is both brilliant, but may not require a deep dive on his observations. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
If I'm not writing this down, if I'm highlighting these keen observations, right, and they're conversation starters too, right? I'm gonna point the camera where you didn't want it to see, right? That type of thing. But my job is not necessary to explain, or my job is not necessarily to uncover.
Right.
Even with people critiquing, I found this interesting in your blog about Jay and him highlighting the things that he doesn't get credit for. And I thought that was interesting because previously he never did that. So that's why it's a 4-minute, report on that. Because in the past, Jay did it very quietly. We hear about it more now.
But some resentment has built up. I feel like.
Yeah.
You
know why? Because taking the high road of not doing the things for the fame still gave the result where people thinks he's doing things for disingenuous reasons. That is purely capitalist, and that he doesn't have a desire to move agency or to move us further ahead, right? Like when he said, we're past kneeling.
Yeah.
Like, isn't that the goal?
Well,
the goal was to be past kneeling, and the other thing is, there's no action. So he decided it's like Ice Cube's letter to the president.
How about this though? I would say like a valid critique of that there isn't action, because you're right. I think the implication is that there isn't action in protest, but I do feel like symbolic protest is a huge action. It almost it almost like pushes back against the symbolism, and not to say that Colin Kaepernick is perfect, because he's not.
He's not. But when it becomes performative. And it's like,
but how? Who's performing? You know what I mean?
The people can tell the difference, right? If you're having a Pepsi at the police rally and that's your commercial, right? That didn't land. Didn't land.
Well, I think Jay-Z is in his moment where certain stuff isn't landing.
Like,
so I think specifically like Che Guevara with Bling On. You're right. That was timely. That is on one of his best songs. It is going to be an iconic line. However, the NFL deal that we just brought up, it's like even the USA Today reporting and the Associated Press reporting on it, like when they asked him, this is where Jay-Z gets real clever. He gets real fucking clever.
He's fucking smart,
when they asked him about the financial disclosure of that deal, Roc Nation finding artists for the Super Bowl, because it was supposed to be, because it was under the aegis of, it's under the umbrella of, hey, I'm here to repair the NFL's relationship with
our community,
with mainly let's call a spade with black consumers, right? Because that's what the NFL produces a product, so we don't want to get it mistaken and say the NFL is beholden to the black community, so to speak. Like politically, we're not stupid. We know that
because they're capitalists.
Yeah, they're capitalists too, right? And so instead of rolling out a deal, which I think would have been a dope deal to roll out, like if you roll out a deal that's like, yo, Rock Nation is selecting the next 10 Super Bowl artists because we have great curation skills, I feel like that on its face is dope. Why did he insert himself on the Colin Kaepernick tip?
Because then you're Chrisette Michelle.
Okay, because he
now you can say Michelle.
You
did this deal, and it's for the bag, right? There's no context. You don't get to speak on the context, and you think you're doing something right by action. And where's Chrisette Michelle now?
But no, honestly, how do you feel like that? How do you feel like that landed? How do you feel like that NFL deal landed?
I may be I can't speak for others, right? Like I had some slight apathy. Like there was no remarkable epiphany on the NFL not giving a fuck on our thoughts,
and they're never gonna give a fuck.
And also too the boycott backlash. I knew that wouldn't hold any water either. So are we just as guilty? Right? Because that's performative, right? Oh, now I'm boycotting the NFL. Yeah, right. I live in fucking New Orleans. Ain't nobody boycotting the Saints. We the Who Dat Nation.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, I don't want anyone in New Orleans to boycott the shit that gives them some
sense of hope, opportunity. Yeah. Well, here's what I'll say. Like, because even I was probably at least ambivalent in the sense that I haven't watched the NFL in years. And part of it was like, that sealed it for me. Like the Kaepernick thing sealed it for me. There were other things where I was like, I don't really fuck with the NFL because of how they treat black folks, their athletes, because their retired athletes was out here with CTE, basically killing themselves.
And we still debating whether CTE real.
Right, exactly, right?
And Junior Seau killed himself. Right?
Yeah, and they made a whole Will Smith movie and shit. And the nigga had a Nigerian accent and all that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we made a whole thing of record that, like, yo, the NFL, we could make a movie off of what they're covering up, right? And so, because that had left a bad, like, impression with me, I'd already divorced myself from that as a brand. And then it was like, oh, you know, if niggas want to have a Super Bowl party, I might, you know, I'll be around. The Super Bowl ads. I was going Yahoo on social media.
And now you're watching without watching.
Right. And so I'm a consumer by way of it surrounding me, but I'm not an active consumer. You know what I mean? I'm not going to seek out the NFL as a brand, right? Now, Jay-Z, and this is where I think Jay-Z is brilliant, and I sometimes contend maybe a little sinister. I do seek out Jay-Z's product, right? Yeah, so he knows a person like he knows a person like me or you who are, you know, either born or raised in Brooklyn or born and raised in Brooklyn, and very, very big fans, students of hip hop, performers and artists of hip hop. I consider myself a hip hop journalist, a hip hop writer. We're invested in the culture, and we in fact,
harbingers even.
Yeah, and we rely on him as a trustworthy gatekeeper. Like I don't personally anymore, right? Because I feel like I'm discerning, but the community does.
And I respect, even if in my discernment or in my prudence, I feel that it does. It may be there's something that I might have issue with, but it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, perpetually because of fame. And because the fact that anyone can have an opinion on your actions, even if they're not capable of perceiving what those actions actually mean.
Right.
You can't make the kind of decisions Jay-Z makes because you don't know even what it feels like to hold $1 million, let alone $1 billion worth of decision-making power. So it's like, what do I really expect him to be doing? And again, the action does matter. It matters because the time, if Jay-Z is all of these things, he could have stepped into being in the NFL other times in his venturing into professional sports. Right. I think it was interesting that he did it then, which as a business move would seem probably bad. Right. It was risky. I think he had the foresight. Yeah, it was definitely risky. So there's some level of, you know, it's interesting. It's like I see more credibility somehow being lent to like Kim Kardashian's legal campaigns than Jay-Z's very plain statements about the industries that he's in and what he has to overcome to still remain.
Well, I would say, okay, it's like that's a tough litmus test, right? Like him versus like
fellow billionaire enterprise.
Sure, absolutely.
Hip hop adjacent or hip hop adjacent.
Yeah, right. Like hip hop made her famous. Ray J. Kanye, that made her famous, right?
Yeah.
So I do agree that like he won't be measured on the scale of a Kim Kardashian, but it's, to my first point, like it's because the world is anti-black, right? Like the world has it's like the anti-blackness part. You don't get to take that card out.
But black people's anti-blackness. What did Beanie Siegel say?
It's alert.
He said, still gave Marcy Dollar Day. They ain't thank us, but we still pay homage. Mm-hmm. That's about a real thing. They did Dollar Day in Marcy. Mm-hmm. They did all of it. That was 20 years ago.
Well, I would contend that he felt hurt.
Who?
I think.
But Jay-Z didn't say that. Beanie Siegel said that.
I do feel
Jay didn't comment on that at all.
Right. But I think based on the history of his lyrics, what he's been saying to us is like, yo, like why bother? That damned if you do, damned if you don't point. Which is I think the point of his that I'm gonna give a lot of empathy here, because like I just wrote an article. I hope you get to check it out. It's on my Medium page. I'm actually gonna throw up the Medium link right now. I did do an article recently. It's drewbreeze.medium.com. I hope y'all check it out. And specifically, what I was talking about was Jay-Z, putting Jay-Z's lyrics next to Fred Hampton's lines for speeches, right? So I think what happened when I wrote that article, because I think the purpose of it to put them in conversation, right? Like as an art piece, because I don't be writing think pieces, I write art pieces. You know what I'm saying? And I write things that I believe that are hypotheticals that I hope to raise other questions. Mm-hmm. So one thing that you read, there's a quote in there. I'm actually gonna put it on the screen with Fred Hampton's speech. But yeah, one quote that I had from that particular piece that really kind of like put me on to how crazy shit is Fred Hampton was like, there's a man in our community and he's a capitalist. Where's my notebook at? I'm about to find my, but whether he's black or white, we need him out of our community, right? That's what he says specifically about the capitalist and why that's dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the thing he also says is like, he brings up Ronald Karenga, and he basically says, he basically says like, yo, like you're a capitalist, but we make excuses for you, like you're old, like your age is what makes you a capitalist. And he's like, yo, I'm young, I'm 21, right? Yeah. The crazy part about me writing that article and isolating these quotes is it reminds you constantly, and I'm just gonna put the power anywhere where there's people. It's on Marxist.org. So hopefully we both get clapped
Black
after
Lives
this.
Matter.
Yeah, we both gonna
Marxist funded.
Yeah, we're both gonna get clapped after this. But the point being that he was 21, bro. Yeah. And they killed him. Mm-hmm. So when Jay-Z is damned if you do, damned if you don't. The damned if you do part is not just public criticism and backlash. It's death. Yeah. And I think even though I can have a critique of him, I think it's important to have a reasonable critique of specific things. So my specific critique is, hey, if you're going to invoke, you're a brilliant lyricist. Mm-hmm. A brilliant lyricist. You're a brilliant lyricist, Cavalier, and Jay-Z is a brilliant lyricist too. You know how to convey meaning, message, and in succinct form. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think if you're going to invoke names like Fred Hampton, if you're going to invoke names like Che Guevara, if you're going to invoke names and sayings from Malcolm X, because he did whole like story of OJ. He said, I'm not black, I'm OJ. Okay, like he was being sarcastic about how OJ really said that in the OJ documentary and the, how they reported on the way that OJ sold out. So it's like, if you're going to talk about a concept like being a house Negro, you're going to need to also define it. And you're also going to need to define where you are in that spectrum and state it honestly.
That, I don't know if that's a requirement, because it's not prose. It's not an essay. And he doesn't have to bend to those structures or rules to make that point if he's getting us to talk about it.
Right.
Because the art part was to get this part to happen. Right.
Well, I mean, but he very plainly, in other theories, like theories of capitalism, he very plain, like, yo, I sell ice in the winter, I sell water to a well. He also says, specifically how he doubles his money. He's like, yo, I got this amount, then I doubled this, then I took these amount. Like, he is very much prescriptive about those theories.
But those are not deep. Those are linear concepts, right? And they're American bred. You don't have, like, they're infused in us. You put me anywhere on this earth, I'll trip them up. You know, these are American ideals, and our paradox as black people sometimes is the conflict of being black in America, that you're a black voice, but oftentimes it's contextualized by how American your perspective is. And that happens so much so that we believe in our minds that our voice is also the dominant black voice too. And we'll emboss that on other places where the context is more nuanced. And people aren't taking all of that from that.
I guess I would follow up with you on that and say, where are places and who are people in the world, and black people specifically, who aren't bowing to capitalism, who are in large black mass or black culture saying, yo, we've chosen these systems and we're a mass of people, and it's not capitalist. Because I feel like there are only pockets.
There's countries with fundamentalist leadership, right? More orthodox leadership, and these are black countries. And I wouldn't say that their ideals are capitalist.
Okay.
But they have their own extremities too, because Americans, as much shit as they talk, wouldn't graciously walk over there and be like, "This is my new life I chose for myself." And that's what I mean, where you see the gap in understanding there. That, like, I was talking to someone just about how relative these things are, how they shape our perspective. We talk about, like, our ills in America and shit like that, and like how awful it is till you go somewhere else, right? Like we have obese, unhoused people, right? Like, poverty here is relative.
Right.
When you go anywhere else in the world, you know what poverty is. Right? It's babies in the street. I've seen it with my own eyes, right? So have you. We've been to our homelands and seen, like, nah, real functional poverty be like, I'm happy, but I have an outdoor bathroom. Right? My basic necessities.
But I mean, they wouldn't say that in Mississippi right now. And
but that's in because of the American standards.
Right. I definitely feel you, but I do feel like, okay, when I looked up the quality of living standards, there's like a quality of life index that the UN and a couple other the organizations puts out every year, right? And it actually breaks down by country, and it does by city. And Detroit is one of the lowest quality of life cities. I mean, and the Bronx is on some third world shit from that, right? And so, even though I agree with you that, like, by relative standards, America's poverty, like, we could dress up our poverty a little bit more, right? Like, it might have a Nintendo Switch. It might have,
people got free cell phones out here.
Yeah, no, for real.
You know what I'm saying? You got Obama phones, and it's also like this
wait,
is
they
kind
still
of
got Obama phones out here?
They giving out tablets now.
Yeah.
You could you could be homeless with a tablet. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's capitalist though, because look. There's that dude. Man, his name escapes me. That's talking about he wants a monarchy. He thinks America should be a monarchy. That we should have a benevolent king. That we should have benevolent monarch.
I'm wondering.
And
it seems like we're kind of headed that way.
Who says we might? I mean,
it seems we're kind of headed that way.
His contention is that we naturally, that's how we've done it, and that people naturally want someone to lead them. And I don't agree with that. But I was speaking to Seneca Scott, current running candidate for mayor, and a friend of mine, and he was commenting on that, and it's like, in response to that, he said, well, that's not going to work now. We're too far past that. That the average person in society, in our society especially, has what kings had. Like, you could go take a shit in the toilet and flush, and it's going to disappear. And like,
but what kings had when and where, and like, what does that mean for us now in terms of, like, we have the very basic resources to live decently.
But we have more than the basic resources to live generally speaking, right? We have these other extremes in American society, like Jackson, Mississippi, but on the average, you have all these things, running water at your convenience, like, right?
Yeah.
And that you needed to be royalty to have that in previous eras of time. That's what I mean. So so that's why the benevolent monarchy may not work now, because how can people's perception? There's no way they can. In fact, that's why they can't even perceive the invisible hand that controls them, whether it's corporate or governmental, right?
Because
they can't even perceive that shit.
We're comforted, right? We're soothed.
We on the titty.
Right, but I wonder, like, now if there's enough vocal opposition scrutiny of that, where now people are starting to be like, yo, actually, when this pandemic hit, like, y'all only gave us one check. We seen other countries give a year's worth of checks, 2 years worth of checks. What happened? Like, what? Like, so we supposed to be rich? Everybody's supposed to be able a dollar in a dream. You know what I mean? Like, kickstart me, and that. Yet I'm seeing GoFundMe's all up and down the
maybe we shouldn't be checking Jay's assets. We should be checking America's.
Well, so that gives me
where's the coffers?
Absolutely.
You know
but that, when we talk about those coffers, though, right? That's what really brought me back to the Fred Hampton piece, right? Because and to the Malcolm X piece, because Malcolm X in that clip that was going around, I don't know if you saw it, but it was like talking about like black celebrities, how black celebrities have been propped up as leaders, and he said, where in the white community are white singers, white comics considered leaders, right? And he was like, where in the white community is a trombone player considered a leader? He's like, in the black community, these people are propped up as leaders. He was like, these are not leaders, they're puppets, they're clowns. So I was really thinking about that concept of a puppet. And I think what you said about like being on the tee, right? And I'm like, everybody pays the piper, because we know Jay-Z's not the richest man in the world, right? We know that so like Michael Bloomberg, for instance, $60 billion, one of the richest men in the world, in the top 10, right? So I wonder openly, like, who are the people that are enabling, empowering in business with Jay-Z that get him in that billionaires club, and what are their interests? Or
is he not lying, and they never expected him to get in the room, and he makes the same commentary like, yo, don't fall for the trick knowledge, right? Once we start getting $1 billion, now it's bad to be a billionaire. And there's a point there.
How about this though? Is it that? Like that's what like is that critique only directed? Because like, I'm like, I can understand him saying like, oh, they're basically like niggering out billionaire. They're like niggering the term in the public sphere by saying, oh, eat the rich. But like, is that eat the rich sentiment just directed at him? Because when Occupy Wall Street came out, right? Remember him and fucking Russell was fucking frontline, and he had the Occupy All Streets shit on. I think what was happening there is the same thing that's happening with capitalists like Ray Dalio, who's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and others. They saw the writing on the wall. I think they are seeing
like
that
a lot of the real rich people do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these people are seeing that they eat the rich sentiment, like, and that's why I wonder whether Jay-Z reads. I'm like, have you read about 1789? Are you reading about the French Revolution? Like, because if you are, have you read The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James? Like, have you read anything about when people's uprisings are critical?
I say this, when you
forces.
Become rich, especially as a person who's come from an environment where you were denied wealth, and you somehow break through the cracks, with wealth comes isolation. So you have a nigga in your camp like Drew to tell you, yo, you should maybe check out that 1789 shit. Because there's no omniscience in success. There's no way you could possibly now, in the penning of a verse that you didn't even write down, now somehow have the foresight to be like, this is all the meanings that can be extrapolated from that, right? When you're still doing your best to connect in the first place with the listener, right? And you're in isolation due to success from those same listeners, right? So it's like, you got to kind of now, what are you exposed to? One thing about Kanye, I will say that's interesting, is in all of his, and I do think America's just fascinated with seeing Kanye eventually,
like self-destruct.
Yeah, self-destruct. And that's with all black men. But and Jay-Z's aware of that. And he's more aware of that than I think a lot of other artists. And that's why he has such longevity. There's a lot of wisdom in how he moves, even if it may seem shady. He's still here, and what human being is not being self-preservationist in some degree, right?
Right, of course. He has to preserve himself.
But what Kanye seems to do, or at least we publicly get to observe him do at times, is he surrounds himself with a hedge of creative minds. Whether or not those minds are strong enough to maybe give healthy
push
opposition,
actually back,
like push back,
Rhyme fests of the world,
that may be
consequence
to be determined
in the crew,
but he still, at least artistically, will have those other voices, and
it's beneficial to him because he can pull from them. Right?
Yes, like and then the only thing is he's such a Chicago nigga that when he learns about something, he acts like the whole world just learned about it. So he invented leather pants or some shit. But Jay-Z doesn't do that. Chicago, Jay-Z has the same circle that he's kind of brought with him into further isolation of success.
Right. So
he's still talking about
folks like Ty is probably just as isolated.
Blink is a millionaire now, right? He's Douce drinking.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Well, I think what I start to worry about when you talk about that isolation is you and I are aware of that isolation, and then this very I don't think it's a plurality of voices on Twitter. I think Twitter is a very big megaphone for a very small number of people. That's even factually why Elon Musk doesn't want to buy the platform. It's like, Twitter, of the social media platforms that have a lot of juice, so to speak, or like a big brand name, it has the least active users, right? And it has the least demographics who are using it. So it's like there are very slim slices of people across the U.S., both like in the middle of the U.S. and in older age groups and in younger age groups. There are only a very small number of people who use Twitter. It's just that those small number of people happen to be like politicians, writers.
Black Lives Matter.
Right, Black Lives Matter, right? Yeah, plants. So specifically, the way that Jay-Z's isolation, like at this point, works is it probably is only registering to people like that, like Twitter people, or people who like might read a book or two about,
or who might click on
these social changes, or who might click on a think piece. Or
because chances are, if you're on Twitter and you want to complain about something, you click and read something else. You can.
Yeah.
So
you always will have the opportunity to. But I think the issue sometimes that I wonder is like, is Twitter, because the one thing that Elon Musk does realize is that it may be a predictor. It may be an indicator of popular sentiment.
Yes.
And that is a place where Jay-Z was always actually really good. He was actually great at predicting popular sentiment. And it's part of the reason why Beyonce is so relevant. She's great at predicting popular sentiment. And if he loses that, I feel like that's a lot of the same Midas touch.
I think she's more early adopter, but
I think she tends to be, right, and I think many women are. Honestly, they open gateways. But I think specifically with Jay-Z, that is his Midas touch, right? And like if he loses that Midas touch, that's the reason why niggas didn't expect him to be in the boardroom and the billionaire. Like that shit is like you stayed connected enough to the people to be able to say, yo, this street knowledge, it's actually way more relevant than a lot of shit that y'all doing in here. Yeah. If you lose that street knowledge, right, because what you do is you say, hey, I always had it, therefore I'm sort of like on my laurels at this point, and they're amazing laurels. They're fucking amazing laurels. Like it's a 4-minute worth long verse of laurels. It's, you know what I mean? Laurel and Hardy niggas. So he has all of that he can like bring to the table and say, but when the social sentiment shifts, like
Dave Chappelle,
right, and like when the social sentiment shifts, if one of the things that made you valuable was knowing the social sentiment, and you don't know it, then what? You know what I mean? Like then, like yes, you're gonna be good financially.
That's why I mentioned Dave Chappelle. So a lot of us, in a very quick amount of time, he's somehow become more seemingly out of touch, and it may be a byproduct of his success and isolation, similar things. Yet at the same time, he has these laurels that reinforce his credibility.
Mark Twain Award,
right? And
one of the best comedians ever.
Or is that just like human nature too?
I think part of it is definitely human nature. I think it's not only is it human nature, it's like the nature of success, like you talked about, which is that like success makes it so that you are around other successful people. Mm-hmm. Like you are around the kinds of people that you attract, law of attraction, whatever fucking, alchemy shit you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. You're going to be around the people who are like you, who are doing
and
the
the comfort of echo chambers.
Yeah, yeah, and we all have them, right? We all have echo chambers. Just like
Twitter.
You're right. Just like Twitter's echo chamber is like, I feel like you're out of touch by saying this. I feel like you misspoke, or I feel like this billionaire revolutionary shit is bogus, and you never understood what it was, right? Like, if that's the case, like, hold on, let me throw this camera on.
But it's also like cats being like, oh, like, yo, fuck billionaires, dead billionaires, and they type it on their iPhone.
Mm-hmm. But that is right. I understand that point, but it's like the equivalency there is like, I don't think there's an equivalency there, and the reason why I would say that is like, we can't not have things just because things were created by capitalism, and it also is like we can't then nullify all critique of like things like hyper-capitalism just because you and I have the ability to have running water. We're not gonna like choose not to have running water as a protest of capitalism.
So then, but it goes back. So then, does Madam C.J. Walker not sell hot combs? Right? It's
right. I mean,
you know what I mean? Like,
it's more about like, or to me, it's about having the choice. And I think what Jay-Z always did really well is he just stated what he was. Like, that was one of the things that I found, like Bomani Jones talked about it, my co-host on the Unhinged podcast, shout out to Koku, talked about it, is like, Jay-Z always made it plain what and who he was. And Che Guevara with Bling On, I think those things are outliers. I think those are actually exceptions until Black Lives Mattered. That the joke I always make. Look, as soon as Black Lives was mattering, then lo was like, yo, actually, this is a good brand play for me. Like, this is a great brand play for me. And like, even
I have other theories on that, but
even the J-Elect record, I think that J-Elect record was really indicative, and the company man Justin Hunt, shout out to him, he talks about this in his YouTube video. Like, that was Jay-Z at least like swooping down in his parasail and being like, no, I could talk these Islam bars, like inshallah. I could not that he never did.
Yeah.
I'm not.
His name is Jay-Z.
Yeah, not that he never did, right? But it was like what he turns up for the purpose of signal boosting and being trendy and popular is like, is that subversion? Is that true belief in some of the principles that he's talking about?
But here's what's interesting. But then you do that and you come and do it better than J-Elect.
Yeah.
On his own
well,
shit.
I mean, that's reps, though. It's like, you gotta, like, how about this? I don't know if, as aware as he may be of a mock Hami or a Cavalier, I don't know if he's gonna do that to y'all on a track. If he's trying to be like,
he did it to Kendrick.
Kendrick is, I mean, he doesn't rate. To me, Kendrick doesn't rate in the same way as a lyricist of
but let's say for
types.
the sake of like, he's a
even
Pulitzer Prize winner.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm
not hating on Kendrick. I'm not hating on Kendrick.
That's why I have to throw him in the mix because,
right.
Yo, I my argument with the Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe remix, right? Mm-hmm. Jay-Z didn't have to be on that. So that's one of those, right?
Yeah.
And to me, you get the best of Jay-Z versus now.
Yo, when it's a prognostication too, because he said, "Up in the clouds,
me and my spouse." He's swooping down.
Yeah. He understands in a lot of ways.
The stance is amazing. It's hilarious too. It's still the evolution of Jay-Z and a Brooklyn energy of like, I'm not really impressed.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. The evolution of that character, right?
That's fine.
Y'all was on a plane just being my baller self, and here you guys go again. And that is how y'all messed up my vibe.
Oh, okay.
That's the stance of the verse.
That's true.
Like, all that, I hear you guys chatting down there.
Yeah. Well,
and God, I was up here with God, and I heard you peons. I heard the plebeians discussing.
But like,
and it's amazing.
Both him and Beyonce are great for that, though.
And
here's what's
the ill joke about that. When that was over, the song didn't need another Kendrick verse. And Kendrick adds this other kind of, and it was good, but it was like, yo, you did too much now. Like you didn't need to come on after Jay said all of that.
I'm gonna pull up that verse because like
yes.
I'm like, yo, we gotta pull the verse out. We gotta pull the verse out. Like,
he does it on the Future joint too. I got the keys. He does it on there too, and it's kind of like this is funny, cause he has this stance like I still gotta come, guys. I still gotta come, and let me tell you how Sagittarian that is, right? The teacher, he's showing you. I'll show you how to do this. I'm not gonna tell you. I'll show you how to do this, son. Mm-hmm. And that's literally what he's been doing this whole time. We changed.
Right.
We changed. He didn't. In fact, the American dream that he got and that he's still highlighting, we wanted it. That's why we co-signed. We wanted that too. We changed.
Well, how about this? Did we want it for just him? You know what I mean? Like, because I think that's where people are kind of turning on him, because they're like, yo, part of your rhetoric is like, yo, I'm doing it. It's like when he responded to Harry Belafonte and he was like, yo, my presence is charity. Like the fact that I'm a symbol is a good thing, right? But I think it's one thing to be a symbol of success, and it's another thing to have $1 billion and actually enable success.
Harry Belafonte, that was tricky for me.
That's very tricky. It's
very tricky because Harry Belafonte now in his 80s, stop acting like you wasn't a lighter skinned sex symbol, Calypsonian turned actor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Who the very same Louis Farrakhan was your rival Calypsonian.
Wasn't Eartha Kitt's quote about Harry Belafonte about how he was like, yo, he wasn't touching me. He was Harry Belafonte wasn't dating black women. He wasn't.
Who's battling Harry Belafonte when he's a singer? Louis Farrakhan, the Mighty Charmer. Right, he got a song calling out Harry Belafonte by name on some battle shit. And here we are, and they're octogenarians, and they relatively are in the same stances, because I don't know if Louis Farrakhan would agree with Harry Belafonte today. And in fact, it was Louis Farrakhan who decided to maintain connection to the people or the voices of hip hop, not Harry Belafonte. So now you want to step in? That's very Cosbyan of you now, bro.
It's very Johnny Come Lately for sure.
No, it's Cosbyan. Because now you're an 80-year-old black man, respectability politics, bro. Where was that at when you were... You see what I'm saying?
So
why are we forgetting who these people are?
This is the Jay-Z verse.
Oh, amazing. I love it.
Don't Go My
Up in the clouds, me and my spouse.
Rumors on the ground getting too loud.
Please turn that shit down. Yo, it's
amazing.
Can't
yourself think. Turbulent shit, I won't spill my drink in the White House with a mink, running through that bitch like it's my house, all up in the hall like a mall. Told you motherfuckers all I do is ball. No, I don't remember you, I don't intend to. Empty memory bank, it's $1 million in it. Baby Hillary Swank. So $1 Million Baby. Like, I mean, I think his dexterity as a lyricist is
and also let's not forget, we be forgetting what this rap shit is. Rap music, no doubt, all the pontificating, yes, all right, all the no doubt. But at the root, psychologically, rap music is black men asserting their value in the face of you better valued off dead. That's it. And we're pretending that the first rap songs that ever came out wasn't also capitalist in the dream that they were aspiring to have, yo.
So
flashy money, cars, and cocaine. The same things, literally.
I don't think it devalues black men and whoever else want to use hip hop as a tool or a platform. I don't think it devalues it to say, or even muddles it or convolutes it to say, hey, it has all this power as a tool, and there are many messages, and sometimes your message is confusing. Like sometimes your message is, hey, on this Jay Electronica record, I am someone who is advocating for blackness, like black life, your black features, your black existence, right? And then on some other records, it seems like I feel like the only way that I can assert or affirm my existence is through money, right? And I think you're right. It's actually not his job to...
Both things can be true.
Both things are true.
Look, I know I contradicted myself. Look, I don't need that now.
Right.
He's told us that along.
In the beginning.
That's human.
In the beginning.
Yeah, that's mad human. Mad human,
That's true. That's true. And that's why the...
Like, I like Kodak Black.
And
people don't think that... Yeah, he's problematic. He's talented. He's a lyricist, in my opinion. And when people meet me, if they only know about me if they only know about like maybe some of the music they think I'm a lo-fi art, whatever the fuck in their head, they wouldn't think that I would enjoy maybe Kodak Black. You see what I'm saying? But both things you could like both things. You can be both things, and you can be contradictory things because that's human. That's human.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about this verse. Is $1 million in it, baby Hillary Swank, sitting next to Hillary, smelling like dank, right? Yep. So that's a Hillary Clinton reference. Yep. Presidential pardon, name one nigga out there harder than him. I'll wait. I've been on my wave like 20 years straight. I've been on my vibe like 20 years straight. Don't fuck up my high. Nights like this, I can fuck up a pie. Still be straight. Pull back, bitch. I got a lot on my plate. Don't waste my breath. I don't know how many moons a nigga got left. Back to this joint. Smoking this shit like I'm trying to prove a point. I'm the highest title. Numero uno. Kill my vibe. That's your motherfucking funeral. Right? And look.
That's the job of rap, yo. You're supposed to be like, I'm iller than you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
And his
Is
character
it
in the
by
movie,
way of now, I think, and this is where I return to the God did verse because.
Oh, and in his stunting there, it's like you can't be in the White House smelling like weed. That's how much I'm stunting.
Right.
I'm at Obama's dinner table. I didn't even smoke weed back in the day. I'm smoking it now because cannabis is legal, and I'm in the business.
But here's the thing, also,
after Kareem got locked up. But
I think a lot more of those like verbal turns, right, are, and the way that he affirms his existence as a black man, the way he says, "Yo, I'm ill," and the way I'm show you I'm ill is so much based on money now. Like it's almost. I'm not saying that it hasn't been a big part of his identity. I'm saying that. If, again, the same premise that I brought up, if you're going to invoke people who thought that black people's intrinsic value did not have to do with money, that is where you're like, yo, you're not in your lane anymore. Yeah. If you're in your lane, if you're talking about the evils and shit like that, hey, I can't help it. Not only can't I help it, I can't help it, I can't call it. I'm a capitalist. Money's the root of all evil, but I got to get this money. That is a Jay-Z I understand. I think that's a Jay-Z with a clear message that's not muddled. Now that blackness has become popular as a commodified product again, because it's not the first time. We know that.
No.
Now
and
that
Beyonce
has been
equally capitalizes on it, if
absolutely.
not more so.
Oh, 100%. In fact, I'm sure there are a lot of conversations that happen between them, between their brand teams, their PR teams, about how to make sure that they look good on the side of blackness, right? And I think they make...
Shout outs to D'Angelo for low-key kicking this entire wave off with Black Messiah.
Black Messiah was great.
In my opinion, album. Black Messiah begat To Pimp a Butterfly, which begat Beyonce's...
and all that. Yeah, and I agree that those kinds of artistic ripples, the ripple effect that someone like a D'Angelo creates is really beneficial to artists like Jay-Z and Beyonce. But I think the other part about that like starts to again like wrinkle things for me is when he goes in his real voice. So in his rap voice, we know he's brilliant. You know, we know that in fact he doesn't muddle a lot of messages or any in his rap voice, maybe a few here and there, right? But in his real voice, which is we're past kneeling. That's the they made up terms. They invented terms like capitalist. Like that is where I think he trips up because it's either he trips up or something ain't right, something in the water. Because if you're that smart, if you're as smart as I believe you to be, especially by your lyrics, especially because the fact you brag on the fact that you're fucking smart all the time, right? So if you do know the meanings of fucking words, if you know the meanings of words, who invented the term capitalist to insult him?
Right.
Who invented that term capitalist? That is like that. The reason why that tripped off a million tweets or whatever is because that shit was suspect. People were looking at that like, wait, huh? Who said that? Like, huh? And what it told me is that his ear is still to the streets for sure. Yeah. His ear is still to the streets, but where is he in touch with what the streets are saying? Is he in touch with what the streets want? And I think he's probably gotten to a point where he's like, yo, I don't need to be in touch. I don't need to be in touch in the way that I used to be. Right? And I think that's like ill for me as an artist. And I'm glad that you're on the pod because as artists, and I'm going to throw like a lot of self-promotional shit, I'm gonna throw the logo, the Honest Man's Guide on here so people know, because it's like, yo, as artists, we want people to know what the fuck is going on with us, with like how we're expressing our voice to the world, right? We want people to know where to find us. You know, we want people to know, like, yo, we're doing this to be noticed, to be heard, and to even give others a lane to be heard. So I definitely get where Jay-Z is coming from in terms of like, how come y'all don't appreciate all I've done for art? And to like to let people be heard, to give black men a voice, to give people from Marcy Projects a voice. Like, we know two brothers. I was talking about this on my DN. We know two brothers of African heritage who's growing up right there in the projects in Fort Greene, and they've made it to enclaves where Jay-Z is probably the only person that they can relate to as people. You know what I mean? Like, as like their actual story, their actual life story. Yeah. They're probably,
and they found inspiration directly.
And rightly so. He's an inspiring story. You know what I'm saying? So
and an inspiring story, particularly if you have American ideals.
Yes. And but the other thing about that and about those brothers and about us here is that when you say I break through the glass ceiling, and you basically acknowledge that there's a glass ceiling, and then you say, hey, I broke through it and I'm looking down on you. Like that, because Jay-Z...
But here's the thing.
Jay-Z wants to be man of the people, and he also wants to be like, ha, I'm looking down on you. And that is a contradiction in terms.
In the same example you gave, those same brothers alienated a lot of their people in their quest to become successful. They lost a lot of us.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? And that's just facts.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not sure
what you do.
Yes, and I don't know how much critique I have for just the fact that he's doing it in an observable way. Like that, you know, I'm not expecting Jay-Z to do anything for me personally other than entertain me. And this is the other thing about it that we all have to take a note of. The art and its consumption is capitalist.
Oh, yeah.
Because we are not in a society of functional art. Once you have made the artist in a position to create and capitalize off of that art, once we've purchased it, once its function is it's your ability to have it, and not just have it because it has a function. When you go to a market in, let's say, Ghana, and you buy a statue, let's say it's for Ifa. You don't know who made it.
Right.
The sculptor, the craftsman who made the statue, he didn't sign it.
But I think this is one thing I want to clarify. It's like, I don't have a critique of capitalism existing. You know what I mean? Like, it is the sea that we're all swimming in. It's the air we breathe.
Participate under duress.
Right. My critique and the thing I want to dismantle is anti-blackness and racism. And because capitalism works so effectively hand in hand with anti-blackness and racism, I have to have a critique of capitalism because it advances, boosts, and fucking amplifies anti-blackness and racism. And it always has, especially the American version of it. And so if you're a person, again, like Jay-Z, who's like, yo, I'm proud to be black. I'm proud of how my lips look. I'm proud of how I got from where you said I shouldn't be to where I am now. I think that necessarily involves a critique of capitalism, because capitalism is the thing that told us, hey, you're, by virtue of the color of your skin, an enslaved person. You are not value beyond property, right? And capitalism does that to many classes of people, but I'm specifically talking about black people, right? So it does it to women. It does it to people who are differently abled. It does it to everyone it wants to keep out of the position of white men.
Yeah, because it requires a bottom.
Right. And so if you're going to celebrate that, knowing that it enables anti-black racism, I have to have a critique of
But it also
you.
enabled him, right? Who gets to now say
it's a contradiction in terms, right?
And he
defied all odds.
He defied all odds, and then in that position, he's not taking the stance of I just want to appease to white people. He didn't code switch. He didn't do any of those things. He remained himself. He's still very black in a way that we identify with him enough to have even critique. Otherwise, we'd be more like, we would have ousted him. You know what I mean? But we would have treated him like Stacey Dash if we felt. You see what I mean?
But there's a calling in that can happen with Jay-Z because the relationship we have.
Or
with
you
Jay-Z.
Become Lauryn Hill at the Grammys.
Right. But I think there's a calling.
Like I didn't make this for white people.
And follow me on this because it's like, it involves a little bit of anecdotal and a little bit of like spiritual and communal belief about who we are as black people. So when we have a criticism of you and you say, yo, why are you criticizing me? You can't criticize me. Look at who I am. Look at what I've done. Look what I've done for you. That is what I feel like divorces him from his community and from any significant kind of like, because even with the Dave Chappelle example, Dave Chappelle, even though he's probably gotten it mostly wrong, he's listening. Like he's actually listening. He's not listening well and processing and synthesizing in a way that is what I would say palatable to people and especially to the community that he's offending so much. But I think he's trying to listen because I think he intrinsically knows as a comedian, and this is the fucking conundrum of black male wealth and wealth superstardom is almost always through entertainment. It's almost always through entertainment. And because of that, we have to have this like call and response relationship with the community, domain, right? And so when he has those moments where it's like, yo, in the call and response, I'm gonna outright reject critique. I think that is where I can say palpably I am disappointed in him, both as an artist and as whatever story you're selling me, bro. Whatever story you're selling me, it was because it included me. Like that story includes you.
Yeah, I didn't.
You know what I'm saying? And now he's like, nah, it only includes you to this point. Now that I'm successful, it doesn't include you.
I didn't. Maybe and I hearing you say that way is interesting, and not because I disagree. I didn't take it that way, and maybe because I remember Jay-Z speaking about critique on him previous to this verse, and he said, "Who are you to critique my shit?" You know what I mean? And he was in the context of that was in an interview he was speaking about putting out a work, like putting out an album, and 24 hours later, there's these journalists writing reviews on your record, and he's like, "How could you have fucking digested this record that I made? Like it took me a year to make, and you listened to it one time, and you got a fucking critique on my shit, and you're rating it whether it's valid."
And I don't participate in that kind of artistic
he
analysis.
went even a step further.
That is the
he said that, and this would be he was saying how that would be like maybe what's a traditional format that would be critiquing an artist of his caliber, right? And then he was like, but then he'll read a blog from this fan who gave a more in-depth listen and critique, and it was more thorough, like maybe what we're doing, right?
Right.
So as an artist, like you said, yo, you're an artist. Well, as an artist, I felt Jay because I was like, yo,
that's why I wanted you on this.
Yeah, especially it's like, yo, it made me critique him differently because I was like, word, we're in this place, we're in a space now where critique in itself has kind of undermined wisdom.
Yeah.
We've made an industry of critique, and a lot of times
that's always been the case with critics for sure.
And then oftentimes, but the difference was before there needed to be some credibility to why you were a critic, and now everyone literally can be one, and that voice can be magnified or amplified by things that have nothing to do with the credibility of that critique. Right. You could be Anthony Fontano, and now you are expert on rap music. When you used to be out here doing white supremacy shit on the internet, right? So now you're an expert because you got views. Like, what makes you the expert? And you're gonna and because of your platform, that's credible because it has numbers. There's nothing historically that made it credible, right? So I felt Jay at that time period because also we're very quick now to defer to critique before digesting.
Yeah,
maybe in processing. Absolutely. We don't process anything. And that's also in the wake of it becoming cool to have no context for anything. Everyone now has somehow been spawned out of completely their own original thought.
Right,
they
right.
completely invented everything
There's
they thought
ahistorical,
of. Yeah, had no one ever did it before them. No one ever wore tight pants before. No one ever wore and that's completely not true.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was showing someone Tekashi 6ix9ine today, and she was like, she immediately was like, that don't make no sense to me, and da. I was like, word, like Onyx.
Right.
Like Onyx ain't the exact same thing. Hear me on that. The
polarizing,
the jarring image of rainbow-colored hair was the same as skinhead bald men
but
yelling
I would say
at you with
the
guns.
resistance of critics by artists, or the resistance of critique by artists, has also always existed. Yes. Right, and here's the thing: I do believe that you have to have some credibility, credentials, just like we talked about Justin
Siskel
Hunt.
and Ebert. You fuck with Siskel and Ebert.
I fuck with Justin Hunt on the same tip.
I fuck with Justin Hunt.
You know what I'm saying?
I
so
fuck
it's
with
like
you.
right, and so it's like, because the people who and I'll say, to my own credit, to your credit, to Justin's credit, and others, the people who made art and have to put themselves on the line, we understand.
Marcus J. Moore.
Right, Marcus Moore, dope fucking newsletter. I love it. Subscribe to it. We understand that because we're actually putting ourselves out there.
And there are other black men. They're lending some diversity to the voices of critique too,
right?
Because they can say equally, like, yeah, I'm a fan of Jay, but maybe this didn't land with me, like you said. Jay can both be a brilliant writer and be off base.
Yeah.
Right, and it's ill because we don't do that. It's so deep on where we choose to do that. I made a comment about Nas once. Nas gives a lot of critique in the perspective that he takes from in the voice of his raps.
Oh yeah.
But then it dawned on me one day that, yo, bro, you're in the room. Yo, you judging it, but you're at the party.
Yeah.
You didn't turn down the invite. You're judging what's it, but it's from the stance of someone who's fucking there. You're there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're also you're a venture capitalist.
Oh yeah.
Literally,
big time.
Right?
Big time. Absolutely.
And no one's out here like, damn, man, Nas made all that money off Ring. The niggas who's the literal ops.
Yeah, I mean, because, Jay-Z is making money off of the prison systems, right? His venture capital holdings.
Is he talking about, is Jay-Z talking about expungement? It's funny because Jay-Z, anything,
he is though.
He is, but what happened? Where was that when Kareem Biggs was in jail? It's expungement is popping now because expungement makes your marijuana business look credible now.
Political prisoners.
It's like it's like my man in South Park.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The dad that got the weed shit.
Yeah.
Right. Integrity.
Yeah.
Integrity Farms. Right. That's Jay-Z now.
Right.
Because Kareem got locked up.
Yeah.
For weed.
For that same.
And
shit.
it was a lot of around that time, and that wasn't that long ago.
The God did verse, right? Let's go back to it because in the God did verse, he talks about that.
Yeah. Because he couldn't say it before.
He couldn't say it before. I mean, he said versions of it.
Yeah.
But he talks about monogram.
Jay-Z decoded, you know what I'm saying?
Jay-Z decoded. We still, light up the 03. We let y'all do the Zazas, OG for the OGs.
We let y'all do the Zazas. It's hilarious.
Right. So
that's the funniest joke. Yeah, y'all Zaza. She's fucking Zaza, man.
Yeah.
When you leave New York and go somewhere else where there's real weed, ask them about Zaza. And you know what they're going to say? I don't know what the fuck you talking about.
So he said, we let y'all do the Zazas, OG for the OGs. Some new niggas out of pocket, talking exotic. You barely been to the Bahamas. That's another topic. Monogram in my pocket off the red carpet. So this is a great line. And Ari Melber breaks this down too. He talks about how monogram is both, the monogram, an actual monogram that you can have sewn on your pocket, but also the monogram being the weed.
The monograms.
The monogram, which is the weed business that he's running, and, also a single gram of weed, right? So that's really well placed and well played. But you're right. It's like, I think he'll only go out for those issues and get ahead of it when he's like, okay, I'm firmly staked in my capitalist stance. I know I'm making money off of that. He's not going to be the person who's like, when Biggs was in jail, I'm not touching that. I'm not touching that. I'm the president of Def Jam at that time.
Or maybe he did, and it was in that era of, Jay-Z didn't tell us that he helped 21 Savage. Jay-Z didn't tell us that he helped Meek Mill.
Right.
He's telling us now.
Dream. He didn't tell us he helped Dream either.
He didn't tell he didn't tell nobody. And it's interesting, the parallel on that too. But for different reason is clearly they don't allow Beyonce to take a stance on anything. And it's interesting that no one critiques that she's the biggest pop star in the world. And then it's like, okay, look, so then when we go back
power is tempting. You know what I'm saying?
Like, but here's what's ill. If we're going to go back to the other templates and the other names that are evoked from these very voices, right? And what responsibility or job is it for our icons in entertainment to be voices of politics or cultural things, right? Yeah. And that was easy for Malcolm X to say after Muhammad Ali became great branding for the Nation of Islam.
And also, when he said that, right, because this is a great point you're making, when Malcolm X said that, this was pre-Malcolm X as an international symbol of black liberation and liberation in general. Yes. And once he went on the Hajj to Mecca, things changed for Malcolm X.
He wasn't underground radio Malcolm X no more. He was Hot 97 Malcolm X.
And he also understood, like, my message is touching more people than I even understand how to like synthesize. I can't even necessarily represent all parts of this message in the way that I would have when I was underground radio Malcolm X. And the other part about that is like he mentioned in that quote, he mentions Dick Gregory. I hate that this camera always auto shuts off. I got to figure out like a little
heat hot.
No, it's not. It just has like an auto shut off feature, and you need to like install a driver, some dumb shit. But anyway, I think the important part about the Malcolm X quote is that he mentions Dick Gregory, and I think Dick Gregory looks kindly. History looks kindly on Dick Gregory as a racial racial commenter. Yeah, sure, depending. I mean, no one's perfect, right? But I think him saying comics and singers and all that stuff, and including Dick Gregory, like I went to the library over there on Schenectady and Eastern Parkway, and Dick Gregory's memoir is still there, and it's a classic book, and it's always going to be in libraries everywhere. So
Dick Gregory also ran for president,
right? And so I don't think Malcolm X in that moment at that level of fame that he was at really understood what Dick Gregory was able to do and put himself on the line to do in the same way that I agree with you. I don't think we know
what we're doing now to Jay-Z. Dick Gregory did to Bob Marley.
He did. And
he's like, you talking about Buffalo Soldier. Mm-hmm. That's supposed to be popping? Do you know what Buffalo Soldiers were? Right. The same way, you're supposed to be smart enough to know? You revolutionary? Right. What's that about?
And so I'm saying Malcolm X, as a young man, had a critique of Dick Gregory because he was like, what's a comedian doing commenting on race problems, right? And so while I'll say this, the courage of artists is necessary. Mm-hmm. Like artists need courage, and then as people in relationship, as the audience in relationship with artists, we need to empower that courage, and we often do. I want to reiterate that point. We often do enable that courage, right? And so when we enable that courage, in the case of Jay-Z, when we enable that courage, I think what we want is respect, and especially in the social media era where you're right, everyone can talk and everyone can have an opinion, and it's because everyone wants to be heard. We know that. We know that everyone wants to be heard. And so if he's willing to hear like, yo, Fred Hampton, he was on some free breakfast, dog, and like this cryptocurrency, it doesn't seem like it's gonna put food on someone's table. You know what I mean? Like this NFL deal, Rock Nation artists at Super Bowls, doesn't seem like it's gonna solve another upcoming housing crisis. Like, yo, remember when you were really involved in like developments in Brooklyn and the Barclays Center? Like, yo, how about if you use those smarts and that know-how to involve yourself in some of the housing dilemmas? Like, we need your problem solving. And the thing about that is like, because Jay-Z is a person who is profit over everything, like, because that's what a capitalist really is, right? Like, you prioritize capital, like gaining capital. I think it's going to take him the better part of the rest of his life to realize that philanthropy, true philanthropy, not just verbal philanthropy through altruism, the things that he's talking about now, it's going to take a lot of loss and a lot of learning and a lot of stumbling and a lot of pairing with people who are not trying to get the maximum 10x result of profit. Like, that's not, in fact, philanthropy is not that. It's just not. And I think he's out of his depth by being like, yo, don't you see all I've done? And it's like, nah, bro, because the other part about you just getting into that room is like a lot of people in that room have started to learn, whether it's washing the money because it's blood money, but they've learned how to give it away too. They've learned how to also like.
So which brings me back to Beyonce, right? Who somehow floats all over this, and then in the evocation of names, Michael Jackson's name gets evoked a lot. The greatest pop star and all of those things. Yeah. But he also holds another Guinness record, and he was the most charitable. He gave the most money away. He intentionally took a stance on global issues.
Yes.
And he
like
used
climate
his platform,
change, like climate change, which is the fucking cause celebre right now.
Like climate
change is a big fucking thing that Michael Jackson advocated for.
Climate change, the war in the Middle East, world hunger, like it's so many things and global issues. And he could have been like Seal when Seal was asked to perform at a fucking dictator's event,
right.
and Seal's response was, "Keep me out of your politics." Right? Because he was Kissed from a Rose. Nigga got $500,000 to come sing Kiss for a Rose in front of murderers. He was like, keep me out of your politics. Nobody said nothing to Seal, right?
Or the golfers who just did the Saudi-funded tournament. A bunch of golfers, American white golfers, was like, yeah, like, we'll take that bag. Phil Mickelson was like, yeah, we'll take that bag.
Those is capitalists, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that happens, right? So again, Michael Jackson could have chosen to not be that. He, in my argument, controversial, he's the closest thing we've had to a messianic figure in the modern era. And he actually fumbled attempt, whatever you want to call it. He made an attempt to walk that line to some degree as much as you could as a human and as an entertainer. Yeah. But in the face of capitalism, he put his money where his mouth was too, in terms of those ideals.
Well, here's
so
one.
we evoking. So it brings it back to the evoking.
I want to follow up on the Michael Jackson point because I think that's a really great point. And I think the reason that that Tupac clip is going around that sort of critiques Michael Jackson
or critiques
capitalism in general, and this is also Tupac Underground Radio. Tupac,
this is also
before he had that.
And let me add something
access.
to that too that somebody had to point out, and I think people forget about Tupac. Tupac had been famous.
Yeah,
he had been famous already before even like Death Row fame. He was already famous before a lot of other rappers, going around the world, touring, all kinds of things that are very
he had access. I don't know if he was famous in the same way, but he had access. He had access.
He talks about his proclivity to Italian girls and why? Because he was traveling the world already famous.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
With renown, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know?
Well, here's what I say also about that Michael Jackson point, which is that, and even with Tupac critique of it, it's like it's different when it's millions. When it's different when it's millions, because billionaires will let you play with millions. It's like, yeah, go ahead, play with your little millions. It's all right. Like,
and I think he threw Mike in as just an example.
Sure.
I think he just named the first like rich person that could come to mind. Because at that time, how many black billionaires could you name? Right. And was Mike even a billionaire yet at that time?
No.
You see what I'm saying?
No. And I think the Jackson estate probably became that posthumously.
No, I don't think so.
No,
because of his publishing.
Okay, because of the Beatles, right?
No, not even
his.
Not even his. Because if you look at who's he owned,
Jackson.
he owned over 200 Beatles songs, but he also ended up in his deal. And again, this is what I mean about critique. This is funny because this is a segue, but this is about critique. We critiqued Michael Jackson harshly through his altruism. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Again, he didn't publicly put in the news all of the times he gave and supported. Sure. And we critiqued him on whether he was black enough. We critiqued him on if he was still speaking to us and relevant to us. We critiqued him on all of these things connected to his relationship to blackness and how we defined it. And while we were doing that, Michael Jackson's only on-screen television kiss. Well, first on-screen was with not just a black woman, an African black woman.
Well, right? I'll say.
Then the business moves he made. I think, and this is just my opinion. I never spoke to Michael Jackson, but look at the catalogs he owned. The Beatles, over 200 Beatles songs.
Right.
Bjork, some of Bjork's publishing. Beck, some of Beck's publishing.
Right.
Eminem, some of Eminem's publishing. Shakira.
So
some of Shakira's publishing.
White artists
who are famous for what?
For doing black music. Now here's
can't get more. And I'm like, and listen, we were shitting on Michael when he was doing that.
I'll say this, not to remove us from the critique, or to say that it was somehow fair or that it didn't harm Michael Jackson, but the critique about his blackness, at least I remember as a child and even now as an adult, the critique about his blackness is like, you're turning your skin white. You know, like you're turning your... And even,
it took him to die for us to realize, he really did have vitiligo, and
but
he had
also
to uniform
anti-blackness
his skin.
is universal, and the way that it affects all of us, whether it's Vibes Cartel, whether it's Beyonce wearing blonde tresses, anti-blackness affects all of us, right? Yeah. And we all may participate in anti-blackness in a lot of different ways, right? So that doesn't, like I said, it doesn't diminish his pain.
His is a unique case, though, right? Michael Jackson made Michael Jackson's sequin glove. Is a phenomenon. It's a symbol in of itself. I could put it on and say nothing, and everybody be like, "Word."
Right.
But where does vitiligo start?
The hands,
your fingers, your extremities.
Yeah, it works this way.
Michael Jackson did that and made a fashion statement, and he did that well before he was put onto the opportunity to even out his skin tone. There's someone in our artist community, in the Brooklyn community, that did that. They're a light-skinned woman now. But if you was in Brooklyn long enough, they used to be a dark-skinned person, and they didn't do that because of their anti-blackness. They didn't personally want to appear to have the symptoms of vitiligo, so they bleached their skin to be more uniform.
Right.
Michael Jackson did that, and he also had the income to have lace front before we knew what lace front was called, because Michael Jackson was bald, because we laughed at him when his hair got burnt off. But guess what? If you black, you got keloid flesh or any burn tissue, hair don't grow through that. So now it's all this anti-blackness. But guess what? If you're a celebrity, you're the most recognized face on the planet. There's a lot that happens to your psyche when you have to look at your own face everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Right?
I think the same
lips
applies.
Was tattooed on, bro.
Listen, I think it's the same thing applies to Jay-Z, right? Which is like the message.
Jay-Z got on a wig,
right? The Basquiat.
Jay-Z got a wig on.
This is all me.
He got a wig trying to look like your shit, and now I'm hearing fucking that Kendrick Lamar got faux locks.
Yeah. No, he got them shits.
Come on, dog.
Because it'd be like a mop. It'd be a mop.
So is your blackness faux black? Is your blackness lace front blackness?
Okay. It's not lace front. It's not lace front blackness. It's not lace front blackness. But I'll say this: like,
made in China blackness, yo.
It then becomes
Yaki black.
It behooves us. It then becomes incumbent on us to ask ourselves those questions. It then becomes incumbent on us to listen to our communities, to listen to the people who call us in. I don't think necessarily that people call Jay-Z in this instance. I mean, I think Twitter Spaces, just as a function of the tool, is a calling in. It's like, hey, the world's having a conversation. We will elect you because of your fame to be a speaker, to be at the top of this pyramid, and we'll listen to you. And I think because it's Spaces and because people can talk back, it was like that could have been an opportunity. Kevin Hart did this to a couple other celebrities, where instead of taking it as an opportunity, like, yo, I can listen now. They took it as an opportunity to be like, yo, I'm here in this position because you're wrong and I'm right. And I think, like you said, it's hard as a human being to resist that temptation. But when you call yourself a person of the people, whether by invoking these major symbols, revolutionary symbols,
through their own
people who were killed, like we said, death is the cost, right? So people who were killed to be those names, right? So that we have a reference point for what Che Guevara stood for. Even if that symbol, like you said, lost much meaning, I, as a person, and I'm not the only person, could go and look up Che's speeches, read his texts. I, as a person, and I'm not the only person, could go look up Fred Hampton's or Marcus Garvey's or Karenga, any scholar, Huey Newton, any scholar. I could look it up. Stokely Carmichael, especially Shirley Chisholm, any scholar. I could look it up because, yes, the symbols are important. And in fact, capitalism going cap, and it's going to turn it into just a symbol, an empty symbol. But when you invoke the symbol, right, that means that there are others who are going to look under that hood. They're going to look under the hood and say, hey, I don't think this means what you're saying it means.
But we get tricky. And I actually agree. I'm just wondering where it's like, let's go back to that. Colin Kaepernick, right? Was he capitalist for taking that Nike deal for millions of dollars after the NFL?
To me, yes.
Right. But we're not saying that about Colin Kaepernick.
I've been saying it. I be saying.
Right. But you see what I'm saying? We get to do this cherry picking of like where it applies.
Well, here's the thing, and that like this is we as brothers, we could talk about this really openly. What skin complexion is Colin Kaepernick?
The end.
Right.
And you know what? Let's talk.
And he was raised by white folks.
This is related to
kid.
Look at the Castro movie. That's related.
Yeah.
Because James Franco.
Right.
Because James Franco's not Latino, right?
Right.
But guess what? John Leguizamo isn't Puerto Rican.
Right. Well, he's like German and shit.
He's like Cuban. He's not Puerto Rican.
Right.
But his identity and his brand is all kinds of way by Puerto Rico. But he's not fucking Puerto Rican. So he gets to come out and be like, he gets to come out and be like, yo.
I gotta pull the screens up. Hold on.
That's what I'm saying.
Yo,
John Leguizamo's heritage, he's not Puerto Rican, yo.
Hold up, bro.
But this heads pull the hood only when they want to make the point that they're right. The same thing that we say Kevin Hart and Jay-Z doing. But when you look, because this is the other thing, Fidel Castro represents white Cubans.
Oh yeah, of course.
And
right.
James Franco's Portuguese.
Oh wow! It says research by the genealogy. I'm gonna pull this up on the screen.
And I'll be having to say this to people because then I look like now I'm Hotep, right? But I'm hashtag cited, just like I was the first one to say hashtag stay woke on Twitter. So it's like, yo, let's pull it up then.
Yeah.
Because the same people that be throwing the stones be the ones that we don't be. Yeah. Yo, John, you not Puerto Rican, bro.
Show that finding
and should a Puerto Rican be playing a Cuban?
Leguizamo does not have Puerto Rican, Italian, and Lebanese ancestry.
Come on,
as he
because
has
you grew up.
Stated. His family is Colombian, and a DNA test found that his genetic ancestry includes European, mostly Spanish, along with indigenous and distant African roots.
Which is every nigga on the planet.
Right.
So it's now bringing it back to Castro.
Right.
When you look at Castro's lineage and you look at Cuba's relationship with whiteness and Afro, like they're very polarized, right? And his own daughter was like, nah, I approve James Franco paying my dad. And you know what? He fucking looks like Fidel Castro.
Right.
And he got more. Portugal is closer to Spain than Colombia is, and Fidel Castro is of Spanish. He is of Spanish heritage from Spain. And if you look at how he got set up in Cuba, people are not talking about this shit, and it's so plain. But because why? Because you think in your fucking TV mind that he was Puerto Rican, that has agency now. So what hoods are we looking under? Is the point I'm making?
That's a great point. Here's what I'll say.
We be doing this funny shit.
Here's what I'll say. You're right that Colin Kaepernick and John Leguizamo benefit from a kind of color privilege via being light skinned and putting on for black and indigenous people. So they're ultimately trusted.
Like your man's on the BT, black girl magic with your blue eyes, black girl magic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But also,
where he at now? He had a lot to say that year.
Also, hey, look, if we look at the movement,
Jesse, right?
If we look at the movement in general, how many light skinned people are centered in the movement generally, like in the struggle for human rights? That is what happens. That is what happens.
Or like what happened to people like AOC? She was super popping, right? Mm-hmm. She was revolutionary, right? What's her messages now, bro? You don't hear nobody talking about that shit because she's now backtracked on a lot of that shit.
Right.
Because, you in the house. You in the house.
Right.
We in the house. And Jay-Z said that. We in the house. The Rock Boys in the building tonight.
Yo. But here's the thing about him saying we in the house, my nigga.
Yo, we in the house.
But then he also will have a whole treatise or 444 about him, like, yo, house nigga, don't fuck with me. I'm a field nigga. And yeah, he be like, I'm a field nigga.
He got his Basquiat wig on.
We in the house. We in the house.
Yo,
here's the thing.
It's like Oprah playing
somebody,
in the color purple.
Yeah, but somebody lying. Yeah, somebody got to be lying.
Everybody. My point is that everybody's lying.
I totally agree with you that John Leguizamo is an example of the cherry picking, the selective.
He's the equivalent of that Twitter critique to me of somebody like that. That he's us. He's all of us.
Okay.
He's all of us. It's an easy stone to cast. Really, what he's trying to express is I feel slighted as an actor. I should be the guy. And we're so dumb that we would have taken John Leguizamo as Fidel Castro despite the fact that he's far fucking removed from any of that shit.
Right.
You see what I mean? Antonio Banderas as a Moor. You know, we'll take him as the 13th warrior, right? We'll fucking accept that shit. That's what I'm saying.
Yo, but it's like the Paul Mooney joke. He said, I would create a movie called The Last Nigga on Earth starring Tom Hanks. Yo, but here's the thing. Like, Jay-Z's awareness of shit like that, and his, not only his, like his hypothetical awareness, like us niggas sitting on the couch trying to guess what he might know. His stated awareness.
Yeah, his literal awareness.
His stated Basquiat wig awareness.
Let me connect that awareness to something that is going to polarize people if they hear me say this. Because posthumous credit is also romanticized. Fred Hampton is a 20-year-old. You're an electrifying 19, 20-year-old. You speaking about Marxism you ain't live. You get to be an eloquent, passionate voice on ideals you haven't fully gotten to put into practice yet. And the danger of that going into practice might cost you your life. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to deem that the way when the result didn't generate anything other than that black man's death. If his martyrdom has also become a symbol where the message has no longer have the oomph to progress us into that, and now we can't actually intellectualize if it was a solution or not because we have no lab results, right? Where Jay-Z, a man in his 50s, is speaking back on that. He's saying, yo, you know what I mean?
He and Obama are very
similar. They're similar.
They're
and
like,
this is also
I
like,
lived.
I lived
to tell
I
it.
lived. And also, psychologically, it's this. I don't know, in how many generations does it take? If we can acknowledge epigenetics now, Jay-Z's born in the late 60s, bro.
Yeah, like he's
born
in the same decade as my mother.
He's born in the same decade. He's born in the same decade. Look. He's born...
People who are young, who are relatively
he's
and
born
even
less than
young.
10 years in the grieving of multiple assassinations of people who had these messages.
Right.
Many of whom were younger than Jay-Z. All of whom are younger than Jay-Z is now.
They didn't get to live to 52. He's 52.
My parents... This is going to be a strange parallel. My parents are married still. This you know. My parents in August celebrated like their 42nd... or 43rd wedding anniversary, right? My sister and I can, as adults, critique what's healthy and unhealthy about my parents' marriage. Sure. But you know what? I ain't never been in one. And a lot of the people who may critique my parents' marriage, even their elders, have not had a marriage that lasts 40 years.
Pass me that coconut water. That's a great parallel because we're going to go into it. Like,
that's why Jay-Z says, who are you to critique me? You can't fathom what it means.
I agree with that point. And I also will say, to the point about relationships, I think that's a great parallel because I think that's the only analogy that will even get close to describing for people what fame is like. Because, like, I think the average person, like, who hasn't been superstar famous their whole lives, or a person like me or you who's like gone viral, baby. Maybe you've gone viral with something that you've done. And maybe, hopefully, you've gone viral with something that's your work. A lot of people go viral unintentionally, as in they get exposed to millions and millions of people because of either a mistake or some happenstance, like, you know, the two white people who was running in the snowstorm. And it was like, and then you fall and you bust your ass, and now that's how you're famous. You're famous like that. But when you're intentionally so, right, and you're a public figure, no one is ever going to get to a point where they fully understand what you go through. They're never going to get to a point. And that is the only and dangerous parallel between Jay-Z and Fred Hampton, which is to say, Fred Hampton became intentionally popular with his message and it got him killed.
Right.
And if Jay-Z went out with an intentionally popular message, I think the closest thing in hip hop, at least in the canon, or there are a couple of close things in hip hop where it's like a message that was truly revolutionary also hit national mainstream. I would say Fight the Power, right? I would say even Dead Prez is bigger than hip hop. I think those very revolutionary messages, like, yo, even the vehicle through which you're hearing this shit is not trustworthy. Even the things around.
You seen LL Cool J's that recently has been surfacing online.
What?
LL Cool J's interview on what talk show is that? Where he discusses writing MC Light's verse for Self-Destruction.
Oh, wow.
And why he chose to not be on the record.
Wow.
But chose to still be involved. He was like, yo, I felt like that didn't represent me. You right?
Right.
But he wrote MC Light's verse on Self-Destruction. It's a very interesting take. Especially because LL is one of these other GOATs that has had heavyweight bouts with a Jay-Z even, right?
But he understands that there's a trade-off.
There was a trade-off.
There was
so
a trade-off.
He was, and he
like,
was young then.
He
was young, and also that wasn't even. I think his trade-off. They didn't have words like on brand. They weren't talking about on brand.
But they knew it. I think intuitively.
They just had different maybe names, right?
Yeah.
He was almost speaking more from that lens than about being a revolutionary in the pangs of that.
Wait, so that's a clip in the interview where he's saying?
Now, yeah, Jay. It was been recently circulating, and then that's why we kind of need to do a more thorough. If we're going to be raising the hoods, because really what we're still grappling with is the art and the artist, the message and the messenger, right? Martin Luther King cheated on his wife. I told somebody today about that, right? Like they knew that, but I was bringing it up in a similar dialogue about Martin Luther King. He has these messages.
Is this the interview?
I believe that's it.
Okay, all right, we'll get
so Martin Luther King, because he was a human being and he might have undermined the ethics of marriage, does it undermine his ethics as a whole? Right? Malcolm X, some say, may have prostituted himself to men.
Yeah. And it's in several of his biographies. And
does that undermine? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
those are his experiences.
Well, here's the thing. There's one thing I would say about you're right. Under a very broad brush, personal vices could fall under how everyone compromises their principles. Or everyone compromises their stated principles.
Yes,
I totally agree with that.
Because you can't be infallible on everything.
I agree with you on that.
We're not deities on earth.
I agree with you on that. But I'm saying if part of Jay-Z's selling point right now is, I'm black before everything. I'm about getting black people in the room. What's better than one billionaire, two, especially when they from the same hue as you? So he says those things intentionally to say, hey, and here's where I'll give him credit.
And he's done those things.
He's done those things, but also reimagining, doing those things reimagines what it means. What it means. It does reimagine. He's like, nah,
I'm nigga, I'm billionaire.
It does, but it doesn't reinvent the system, right? And it doesn't
nor can it.
It doesn't subvert it, nor can it. To the original point, is that what an artist can do? Maybe not. I would say it's skewing on the maybe not, right?
We acting like we want Jay-Z to wear the fucking V for the V fucking now he's supposed to blow up Parliament.
Here's the crazy shit though. There's going to be an artist. Speaking of a Tekashi 6ix9ine, because I think he's
he's closer to that than Jay-Z is.
But I'll say there's going to be an artist at some point who does take this to the brand zenith, right? Where the revolution is fully televised and it's a concept, like a Bamboozle. There will be an artist like the Mau Mau's and shit.
The rap artist.
There will be that.
What you call it? Their QAnon, they sponsored mixtape, the QAnon.
You know what I mean?
Rap mix. Yo, QAnon, yo. Fuck with me if y'all see this shit. Y'all can put out I'm looking for a distributor. Y'all can
okay. First of all, saying that on YouTube, niggas will do that. They will do that.
QAnon. I have no problems with y'all.
Make 10 videos and you'll get them to do it.
I didn't take the jet.
So this is the LL Cool J
with Ghislaine. I didn't get on the jet with them. Chris Tucker did, but I didn't. I'm not on the flight logs.
This is the LL Cool J writing
self-destruction.
You're wild.
Self-destruction. I wrote MC Light's part. I didn't want to be in it because I didn't have a record out for a long time, and I don't want the first time you hear me over that music, self-destruction.
Look at his face.
I can't.
What that mean, LL?
That is constructive.
I wanted to put my input in without having to be on the record, so I did it that way, and I didn't even ask for no credit. I ain't get no money. I told him not to tell nobody. So most people think, LL thought he was too big to be on self-destruction. I wrote MC
That's
Light
the
Spark
same
on my
stance
heart,
as Jay-Z's 4-minute verse.
What's
I ain't
cool?
tell nobody, but I'm telling y'all now.
Feel that you really have a responsibility because everybody is looking up to people.
I felt like I wanted to do my part. It was something that I supported.
Right.
But at that particular time, I didn't feel that it was right for you to hear me on the radio on that record for the first time in so long.
Why not?
So I just wrote.
Why not,
and
LL?
stepped out, and I didn't even want to be in the video.
Yo, Todd, why not, yo?
You know?
In that part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yo,
you see?
Dr. Ruth is on there, G.
Yo, and I'll be bringing
Ruth
this
is
type
on
of
there.
shit up to people. You know I'm Daryl. You know I remember shit that niggas be wanting to
You're a
forget.
database. I was
So
just
I'm
thinking
putting-
that, like, yo, you a fucking
I was
database,
like, yo,
bro.
That's why I gotta be bringing these shits, because when you do that to people, they have to now remember, was you always on that side? You know what I'm saying? Lucy, you got some splaining to do.
Right.
The only one they hate and got the same look just like that's what
Yeah,
Jay-Z
yeah.
said in the freestyle, right?
Yeah.
This ain't new. Jay I died.
It's all good. This is just a required commercial break. You need some water? It's all good. It's all good. There's glasses right above the sink. Little commercial break for the smokers out there.
Woo!
No, that was the big one. That was the big
By
one.
Menon. By Menon.
So I think that's a great clip that you brought from LL, and specifically, I love the fact that you're able to draw a really clear parallel between those situations because of the lines that artists have to draw and that the lines that people often aren't willing to. Because one of the things that Dream Hampton said that I found really instructive and helpful is when she was on social media. She has not been on social media for a while, but she used to be on Facebook, right?
She was on Twitter for a while.
She was on Twitter for a minute. And she was vocal about this point on Twitter as well. Is she would say, like, yo, stop expecting these, and this is when she was close to J&B, and a lot of the Black Lives Matter shit was popping up, the Trayvon shit, the Mike Brown shit, and she was like, yo, stop putting those expectations on these people, because they're not that. Y'all want them to be that, but they're not that. And
never were.
well, here's the little nuance I would add to that. The nuance I would add to that is, why you keep telling us you're that? You know what I mean? Like, why do you?
Because he knows that we want him to be. It's like she said. He's echoing that point.
Yeah, I mean, so
and it's like, but no one could ever be.
No one could ever be.
No one could ever be
without
because
getting killed, right?
Without being killed, or also without us. There is a perpetual fascination with the fall from grace as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with black men, we're waiting to see if and when you're gonna die. So that's how cyclical it is. You have this hip hop shit because this is why I argue that this hip hop is the only postmodern. There's no, while this is happening, that's what I'm about to write about it. And those who have signed up on my website, I want to have this dialogue with y'all. Because in the same week where Drew and I, both publicly and privately, were deciphering all of these moments, you have Fulton County black politicians basically saying, we're going to prosecute you for your rap lyrics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Enjoy
Same week. In the same week.
I would bring up
in the same week. So
an article by
what genre of music, what medium of art does that ever happen?
Right.
It's still wrapped around black men's death.
All right, I'm gonna bring up an article. This is really relevant to this by Callie Holloway, good friend of mine, and this is hopefully I can get it on screen because it might have a paywall, but we'll find out. We'll find out if the paywall applies here.
Shout outs to paywalls.
Oh, where is that? Hold on, I think I just lost it. Okay, here we go.
Shout outs to YouTube ads on your Fred Hampton speech watches.
So this is called "When Rap Lyrics Become Incriminating Speech" by Callie Holloway, and it says Jeffrey Lamar Williams, one of the most critically revealed and commercially successful figures in contemporary poetry, has been held in solitary confinement in a Georgia jail since his arrest on May 9th. Williams emerged from Atlanta's thriving poetry scene in 2011 with Come From Nothing, a genre-reshaping collection filled with imagery from his childhood in Jonesboro South, the notorious housing projects where young Williams watched his older brother die of gunshot wounds. The collection and prolific output that followed would launch a slew of imitators and proteges. She goes on. If that sounds odd, that verses of poetry might be used to prove a poet's participation in a criminal enterprise, hold that thought. I neglected to mention that Williams is a multi-platinum, Grammy-winning rapper who goes by Young Thug. You can replace every instance of poetry above with hip-hop. And so, even in hip-hop, with like shit like the Hip Hop Police, it's like we still facing
who I've encountered
death and imprisonment as the only option. So I'll never take that away. It's like we do have to talk about the full picture, right? And I think that's part of like how or why I invited you here, why we get down like this on the Honest Man's Guide. I'm gonna throw up the logo real quick. And you check out Cav's newsletter, because if anything you got from watching the stream is that there are people with information here with reference points who are gonna give you the not just plain whataboutisms that people try to do.
Here's what I think, and I'm right because I think it.
Yeah, it's going to be a frame of reference for us to actually have this discussion. Now, is Jay-Z a billionaire revolutionary? He's certainly revolutionized things. He's changed certain things. Is he the kind of revolutionary that he might cite in his raps? Well, I don't know if the kind of revolutionary he might cite in his raps will be alive right now.
Perhaps maybe we need to define what revolutionary means in the current context, because maybe he is in the current context. He might be in this framework, in this digital, physical world, in this fucking, take a shit in the Web3 world. Maybe he is revolutionary. I don't know. Our revolutionaries were murdered, right? As we said. So how do you incite revolution now? Even in our closest observational vantage points to what revolution might look like, and even that was branded, because in Cuba the revolution was branded. There were the only advertisements you saw in Cuba during Castro's regime was for the revolution, right? So now we have this idea of what revolution is, but it's very cosmetic. So much so that they use that idea of revolution to co-opt us. So then when you go and review in 2020, who's starting these riots? It's Umbrella Man. It's this guy. It's that guy.
Umbrella Man.
You see what I'm saying?
Umbrella Man,
so now it's Umbrella Man. So I ask who of you were the revolutionaries? If the seed for revolution was implanted by the oppressor, Jackson Pollock was funded by the government. What's revolutionary? Or maybe it was revolutionary that he took government funding and was like, yo, I'm going to do this. But you still were a pawn in the agenda. The American government wanted to not look like communists.
Well, how about
so
this?
We're going to fund abstract art only to fund our ideological supremacy over communism.
You know what? To your point earlier about like, okay, so what's the action? Because Jay-Z was fair in saying like, I want to be able to take the action. So I think one of the things that I believe the action is like beyond the critique. Once we and I don't even want to use just the word critique. Like once we cite, once we define, we define the terms of the discussion. We cite the sources and the references that we're talking about in those terms, and then we move toward what we collectively want to do. And I would say one of the things I collectively want to do is affirm and acknowledge that our progress will be gradual, and it will come from many, 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 many live streams, blogs, podcasts, tweets, whatever. Many, many, many of those in concert, more than it will come from a single symbol saying that they're the next this. They're the next messianic figure.
May I add on to that?
Yeah.
I also propose that it not be reliant on this imagined singular monolithic black voice.
Yeah,
that's a paradox set up to fail in of itself, because that's not true, and it's not asked of any other group of people to be this one monolith voice in agreement to now represent what we need to be doing.
Right.
That it may be to be really true to Fred Hampton's dream, the unity of voices has to be from seemingly disparate or across the party lines or post-racial, which I don't fuck with that term. But Fred Hampton understood.
It requires a coalition.
We need coalition. Yeah. We need coalition more than we need unity.
Yeah. Okay, you know what? On that note, I think I'm gonna end the stream because I just feel like that was fucking dope. Like, yo, that was fucking dope, bro.
I came here to get high. I didn't even know.
Listen. This has been the Honest Man's Guide. This is Cav Wins. I'm Drew Brees. I'm gonna throw up my Twitter and my Cash App, and because I'm still in capitalism.
Because we hoes too.
Yeah, well, I'm still in capitalism. You know what I mean? Don't get it fucked up.
We dropping these thoughts like they hot.
Don't get it fucked up. This is not a Basquiat wig. I can't get a haircut right now.
Yeah, I gotta get my braids done every.
You know what I'm saying? Yo, so thank you so much for anybody who watches now, who tunes in. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell on the YouTube channel. I'm gonna be going live at least a couple times a week. But I really appreciate anyone who stopped in, who wanted to be a part of the stream, and I look forward to joining you later this week. Peace.